So, the latest election results are in, and the news is buzzing with talk of a mandate. The winning candidate is riding high, claiming a clear message from the people. But hold your horses, folks, because there's a tiny detail they might be glossing over: voter turnout. Let's talk about Florida's recent special election. A whopping 26% of registered voters decided to grace the ballot box with their presence. That's right, 26%. To put that into perspective, that's like letting your goldfish choose your dinner for a month based on which flake of food it eats first. Now, the victor in this electoral masterpiece managed to snag a breathtaking 21% of the registered voters' support. Skippy, as we'll call him, is now apparently the voice of the people. The other 3 to 4% are presumably still trying to figure out if they accidentally voted for the sentient turnip running as an independent. Here's the thing. When less than a quarter of eligible voters actually bother to show up, it's hard to call it a resounding endorsement of anything. It's more like a collective shrug of indifference. It's like going to a restaurant with 100 seats and only 26 people show up. You wouldn't exactly call that a packed house. You'd probably just assume the food was terrible and the service was even worse. But hey, who are we to judge? Maybe those 26% are just a really representative sample of the electorate. Or maybe, just maybe, we need to rethink this whole majority rule thing, when the majority can't even be bothered to drag themselves to a voting booth. Let's talk about political flexibility, shall we? Or, as I like to call it, ideological contortionism. It's the fine art of twisting and turning your beliefs to fit whatever happens to be popular at the moment. And nobody, I mean nobody, did it better than the Gipper himself, Ronald Reagan. Now, I'm not saying that people can't evolve their views over time, but Reagan's transformation from a New Deal Democrat to a conservative icon was less evolution and more full-on metamorphosis. It's like watching a caterpillar morph into a butterfly, except the butterfly then puts on a cowboy hat and starts selling trickle-down economics. And let's not forget Reagan's background as an actor. He was a master of delivering lines with conviction, even if those lines directly contradicted things he'd said a few years earlier. It was all very convincing, of course. After all, this was the man who convinced America that ketchup was a vegetable. But hey, who needs consistency when you've got charisma, right? Remember when America was all about building things, cars, steel, those little plastic things at the end of shoelaces? You name it, we made it. We were the world's factory, churning out goods and exporting them to every corner of the globe. Fast forward to today, and what are we churning out? Mostly tweets, TikToks, and a whole lot of debt. We've gone from being a nation of producers to a nation of consumers, and frankly, it's left us a little vulnerable. It's like we traded in our tool belts for a giant credit card. And who's benefiting from our insatiable appetite for cheap goods? Well, let's just say that the folks sitting on mountains of oil and rare earth minerals aren't complaining. We've essentially outsourced our economic power one cheap plastic trinket at a time. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for globalization and free trade. But it seems like we've let the pendulum swing a little too far in one direction. It's time to rediscover our inner maker and start building something other than a mountain of Amazon boxes. Section 4. Morning in America, again, the allure of nostalgia and the politics of the past. Ah, nostalgia. That warm, fuzzy feeling you get when you think about a simpler time, a time when the air was cleaner, the music was better, and the politicians, well, they were probably just as bad, but at least they didn't tweet. Nostalgia is a powerful drug and politicians know it. They're always trying to tap into our yearning for a bygone era, promising to make America great again, or to return to our values. It's like a political comfort food, a way to soothe our anxieties about the present by invoking a romanticized version of the past. The Reagan administration was particularly adept at this. They peddled a vision of America as a shining city on a hill, a beacon of freedom and opportunity. It was a powerful image, one that resonated with a lot of people. Of course, it conveniently ignored the fact that for many Americans, particularly minorities and the poor, that shining city felt more like a gated community. But hey, who needs facts when you've got a good story, right? Section 5. Clichés, slogans, and the soundbite presidency, the Reagan legacy, and the decline of political discourse. Remember when political speeches were more than just a string of carefully crafted soundbites? Me neither. It seems like we've entered the era of the soundbite presidency, where complex issues are boiled down to simplistic slogans and catchy phrases. And who better to blame for this sorry state of affairs than the great communicator himself, Ronald Reagan? Don't get me wrong, the man could deliver a line, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, there you go again." Pure gold. But somewhere along the way, substance got lost in the pursuit of style. Political discourse became less about engaging in thoughtful debate and more about winning the news cycle with a zinger that would be turned into a meme by lunchtime. It's like we've traded in our dictionaries for a thesaurus of political cliches. Everything is common sense or job killing or a threat to our way of life. It's enough to make you long for the days when politicians actually tried to speak in complete sentences. Section 6 B-Movie Politics, a legacy of simplistic narratives and complex consequences. So here we are, living in the aftermath of the Reagan Revolution, surrounded by the ghosts of policies past. It's a world where trickle-down economics is still a thing, spoiler alert, it doesn't work, where military spending is through the roof, and where political discourse has been reduced to a series of memes and Twitter feuds. It's tempting to look back on the Reagan era with a sense of nostalgia, to view it as a simpler time when America was great, again. But the truth is, the Reagan years were just as messy and complicated as any other period in American history. The problem is, we seem to have learned all the wrong lessons from that era. We've embraced the simplistic narratives, the feel-good rhetoric, and the cult of personality, while ignoring the complex realities that lie beneath the surface. It's like we're trapped in a never-ending loop of B-movie politics, where the good guys always win, the bad guys are always easy to spot, and the solutions are always simple. But real life is rarely that neat and tidy. And until we start demanding more from our leaders and ourselves, we're doomed to keep repeating the mistakes of the past.
If you like history and love poetry, then you're in for a treat. Let's explore the chilling truth of winter in America. From the Indians who welcomed the Pilgrims, to the buffalo who once ruled the plains, America's story is one of constant change. Like vultures circling beneath dark clouds looking for rain, we've been searching for equality for all. Just like cities staggered on the coastline, living in a nation that can't take much more, and like the forests buried beneath the highways, never had a chance to grow. And now it feels like winter in America. A time when our leaders are silenced and betrayal is commonplace. People know something's wrong, but no one knows how to fix it. The Constitution, a noble piece of paper, with free society, struggle but died in vain, and democracy now feels like a ragtime on street corners, hoping for some change. Robins perch in barren treetops, watching last-ditch racists march across the floor, while peace signs in our dreams never had a chance to grow. Yes, it seems like winter in America. But remember, winter is just a season. Spring always follows. Hold on, and let hope be the spark.
Systemic racism is a serious problem that affects millions of people every day. It is deeply embedded in the fabric of our society, influencing various aspects of life in ways that are often invisible to those who are not directly affected. It is a system where racism is built into the rules, laws, and policies that govern our institutions. These rules often seem neutral on the surface but have discriminatory effects. This means that racism is not just about individual prejudice or personal bias, it is about the collective impact of these rules and policies on different racial groups. It is about how society is set up to favor some groups over others, creating disparities in wealth, education, and opportunities. This happens because of a long history of discriminatory practices and policies that have been in place for generations. These historical injustices continue to affect people today. Systemic racism impacts all parts of life, from education and employment to housing and healthcare. It creates barriers that prevent people of color from achieving their full potential. It affects education, jobs, housing, and more. For example, schools in predominantly minority neighborhoods often receive less funding, leading to poor educational outcomes. People of color often face more barriers and fewer opportunities in their daily lives. They are more likely to be unemployed, underemployed, or paid less for the same work. This is not because they are inferior or less capable. It is because the system is designed to disadvantage them, making it harder for them to succeed. It is because the system is designed to disadvantage them through policies and practices that perpetuate inequality. This systemic bias needs to be addressed and dismantled. We must understand systemic racism to fight it effectively. This means educating ourselves and others about its roots and manifestations. We need to learn about its history and how it works in order to recognize and challenge it in our daily lives. Only then can we begin to make meaningful changes. Then, we can start to dismantle it by working together to create a more just and equitable society for everyone. This requires collective action and a commitment to change. Systemic racism did not happen overnight. It has deep roots in American history. One example is slavery. For centuries, black people were enslaved and denied basic rights. This created a system of racial hierarchy that still impacts us today. Another example is Jim Crow laws. After slavery ended, these laws were put in place to segregate black people from white people. This segregation extended to schools, housing, and public spaces. These historical injustices have had a lasting impact. They have created disparities in wealth, education, and health that persist to this day. Systemic racism affects people of color in many ways. In education, schools in predominantly black and brown neighborhoods often receive less funding. This can lead to fewer resources and lower quality education. In the criminal justice system, black and brown people are disproportionately stopped, searched, and arrested. They are also more likely to receive harsher sentences than white people for the same crimes. In healthcare, people of color often face discrimination and bias from medical professionals. This can lead to disparities in access to care and health outcomes. Section 4. Dismantling the architecture of inequality laws and policies to reform. To address systemic racism, we need to change the laws and policies that perpetuate it. This involves a comprehensive review and overhaul of existing regulations that have historically marginalized communities of color. By scrutinizing these laws, we can identify and eliminate the biases that have long been embedded within them. This includes reforming the criminal justice system. We must ensure that justice is truly blind and that everyone, regardless of their background, receives fair treatment under the law. This means revisiting sentencing guidelines, eliminating mandatory minimums, and addressing the racial disparities in arrests and convictions. We need to end mass incarceration and invest in community policing. By focusing on rehabilitation rather than punishment, we can reduce recidivism rates and help former inmates reintegrate into society. Community policing fosters trust and cooperation between law enforcement and the communities they serve. We also need to address economic inequality. This involves creating policies that promote fair wages, job opportunities, and economic mobility for all. By tackling the root causes of poverty, we can create a more equitable society. This means investing in black and brown communities, providing affordable housing, and supporting small businesses. These investments can help bridge the wealth gap and create sustainable economic growth in underserved areas, and ensuring equal pay for equal work. Gender and racial pay gaps must be closed to ensure that everyone is compensated fairly for their contributions. This requires transparency in pay practices and accountability for employers. Furthermore, we need to reform our education system. Education is the foundation of a just society, and every child deserves access to quality education regardless of their zip code. This includes providing equitable funding for schools, diversifying the teaching force, and ensuring that all students have the resources they need to succeed. Schools should be places where diversity is celebrated and all students feel valued, and creating culturally responsive curricula. By incorporating diverse perspectives and histories into the curriculum, we can foster a more inclusive and understanding environment for all students. Section 5. Towards a Just Future. Confronting systemic racism and embracing equity. Fighting systemic racism is a continuous process. It is not something that can be achieved overnight, but rather requires persistent effort and dedication from each and every one of us. It requires us to challenge our own biases and to speak out against injustice. We must be willing to have difficult conversations and to listen to the experiences of those who have been marginalized. We must work to create a society where everyone has an equal opportunity to succeed. This means addressing disparities in education, employment, healthcare, and housing. We can all be part of the solution. By coming together and supporting one another, we can make a real difference in our communities. By educating ourselves about systemic racism, we can better understand the root causes of inequality and work towards meaningful change. Supporting organizations working for change is another crucial step. These groups are often on the front lines, advocating for policies and practices that promote equity and justice. And advocating for just policies is essential. We must hold our leaders accountable and push for legislation that addresses systemic inequalities. By taking these actions, we can create a more equitable future for all, a future where everyone, regardless of their background, has the opportunity to thrive. Remember, silence is not an option. In the face of injustice, we must all take a stand. We must all raise our voices and work together to dismantle systemic racism and create a society that truly values justice and equality. Together we can make a difference.